I'm now delighted and honored to introduce our two speakers tonight, both of whom are well known to almost everyone on this call. It would be hard to find two people better able to talk about leadership. Rear Admiral retired Boris Lushniak currently serves as the Dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland. He was previously professor and chair of the Department of Preventive Medicine and Biostatistics at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. During his long and distinguished career in the Public Health Service, he served as Deputy Surgeon General from 2010 to 2015, as well as Acting Surgeon General from 2013 to 2014. Rear Admiral Scott Giberson is currently the longest tenured flag officer in the Commissioned Corps. During his distinguished career, he has served as Deputy Surgeon General in 2013 and 2014, Senior Advisor to the Office of the Surgeon General, Chief Pharmacist of the USPHS, and Director of the Commissioned Corps Headquarters. Next month, he will retire from the Corps and become Executive Director of Corporate Affairs at AMI Expeditionary Health. Both Admiral Lushniak and Admiral Giberson have long lists of accomplishments, awards, recognitions, and exemplary service on deployments and posts around the world. But both of them have asked me to keep the introduction short, and so I will do that. Scott, Boris, the Zoom is yours.
Great, so I'll take over first because Scott is actually going to be talking most of the evening. First of all, welcome to everybody. I know we're up to 161. Hopefully people will be coming in. I know Jackie was saying that we broke the record, but that's only because Scott, I think, infiltrated the numbers to a large extent by making the pharmacists all register. And you know, they're much too busy to actually show up tonight. So Scott, thank you for doing that. You know, when we sort of decided to put this little chat together, and it really is a chat. Notice that last night I did film my fireplace. There is my cat. I'm not a cat person, I'll admit, but we do have two cats in our household in front of the fireplace. There's the chair. And our idea was in better times, it actually would be perhaps a panel of us sitting around and talking about leadership. But why is this so critical? First of all, it's the connection between two of us. And you know, we like to call ourselves leaders, right? And Scott and I work together very, very closely for a very difficult time span within the Office of the Surgeon General and within the Assistant Secretary for Health's office, and walked away with many lessons from that, some of which we can talk about tonight in terms of lessons learned. But at the same time, being career officers in the Public Health Service, like many of you either currently are or have been in the past, there really is this dearth, and there is this lacking within the Public Health Service of really trying to get a sense of what do you do, right? How do you put all this together in terms of not only formal leadership training, but even the idea of talking about leadership, right? We intersperse it at the COA meetings, we intersperse it in something, you know, get-togethers along that whole pathway. Tonight is really not about Scott and me, right? I'm looking at this incredible litany of people on the multiple screens here tonight. And boy, there are people who are extremely well known as leaders. So first of all, let's not pretend that Scott and I have it all figured out, right? The first thing I tell my students at the University of Maryland College Park nowadays when we talk about leadership is what? One is always a student of leadership, right? One is never done. And part of tonight's discussion, and we really need to make this a discussion. So use the chat function. We're going to pick on you. We're going to ask you to unmute at times, right? We may pick out names out of the hat to get your perspectives on this. But before we get that started, I want Scott to sort of, you know, tell me a little bit about how you learned about leadership, right? You know, is this, and the real basic question a lot of people ask is this a born trait? Or is it a learned trait? Or is it a combination of things? So Scott, what do you think?
Thanks, Boris. I just want to say thanks to Stay Away for having us. Are you sure you want us to talk for 40, 50 minutes? I just want to put that out there and apologize up front. You know, it's great to be a part of this duo again and rejoin my former work wife, Admiral Lushniak, for another one of our talks. even when we were active duty, both of us, people didn't know what was going to happen. And I can guarantee you now, I have no idea what's going to happen in the next 40 minutes. So we'll let Boris take the lead on this one and ask questions. So thanks for that question. It's sort of a combination of both, I think, Boris. To everybody, it's like speed in a way. You're born with a certain amount of speed, but you could always get better. You could always increase. You could always find ways to improve. And leadership in a nutshell, I think, is, as you say, a constant learning process. I do think you do start with a certain amount of base leadership capability and capacity, but without a doubt, regardless if you're an extrovert or introvert, whether you're, lead from the front, lead from behind, there's ways to become leaders and to be great at it, to find the right fit for you as you go.
When would you say that you first sort of had that leadership opportunity? I mean, looking back, this is throughout your whole life. Tell me, sort of, when did you sort of get cast in this idea of saying, I think I can do it, or being put into that uncomfortable situation initially?
I think it actually started before I got to be a professional. You sort of wanted to develop it in school, in your schooling, whether it's your professional degree. And you can see if you're even as simple as leading a club in school or leading a team in sport or whatever it may be, you start to develop some of the same skill sets really that you would need as a professional. But then when you become a professional, you have to focus and hone those things down. And so at every level, and this is for all the junior officers too, every single level, whether you're an ensign, LTJG, or a captain, there's a place and a venue and a medium for you to lead. And my recommendation is take advantage of all those and seek those opportunities and seize them so that you can develop your skill sets early on.
And in terms of, learning about, when I give my talks on leadership, I always start off with a Yogi Berra quote. Those are always great quotes. And, you can observe a lot just by watching. It's one of my favorite Yogi Berra quotes, right? So what about this idea of, we always used to talk about how, in our time together, and again, we're not here to mention names. We're not going to reveal the people behind it, but we learned from extremely talented and vivacious and outgoing leaders. And at the same time, you learn from people who aren't really good, who are put into leadership roles, right? What did you learn? From sort of this observation of others.
It's easy to say that you learn how not to lead when you are part of that situation, and you see leaders that may not be doing it the right way. And leadership by position, not by actual someone believing and trusting you as a leader. It's just because you're in leadership position. But I think that it's really important to develop the ability to look through the lens of someone else. We could think initially of people as being not as great a leader as someone else, or being a great leader, and the ability to look through the lens that they're looking through sometimes helps a lot with your own growth and development. I succumbed to that in many emotional situations when we had a really challenging time, and you want to criticize a leader or you want to say something, off the cuff on things, but when you really take the time to look through their lens, you see a little bit of the reason why somebody might do certain things or lead a certain way. And the same thing goes for people who are great leaders. It's the philosophy of understanding how they make you feel and how they do it. And you're going to keep asking me questions, Boris, but I'm going to turn it around on you too and ask you some questions if you don't mind. But
go on, man. That's the way we're playing this. So it's like a tag team. So, here, touch me, man.
Yeah.
Touch. Okay, here.
I got you. Okay,
here we go. Tag.
Okay. So, I was going to ask you a similar question. We did go through some challenging times, and in my opinion, you could say what was the most challenging leadership time frame or timeline you went through in your leadership portion of your career? Maybe not as a junior officer, but as a more senior officer, captain through 2-star.
I think it's a great question, and there's so many such time periods. And part of it really was this idea, and I think this is very difficult for us as career officers in general. It's that fine line that, to some extent, the politicals, and I'm not dissing the political side of the house here. I'm far from it. I'm not here to create controversy in that realm. But it's that sense of, they also have that struggle, right? In terms of looking, and specifically the political appointees, such as, right, you know, we have a new Surgeon General, we have a new ASH, right? Both of whom come from the world of science, both of whom are known leaders, right? In terms of leading both at the state level, a former Surgeon General coming back, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the biggest challenge of leadership, right, when you get to that level of leadership, is really that interplay between the politics of the world and the science of the world, right? How do you lead when, in fact, there are forces out there saying, oh, no, 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 you know, let's look at it a little bit differently, right? Let's look at it, you know, and I remember one occurrence, and you know, we won't go into specifics that you and I had, right, which was we were arguing for a certain path forward regarding the Commission Core, actually. And we put together this big presentation to leadership at the department. And the leadership basically, you know, was looking at choices A versus choices B. And we put together a case based on data, based on reality, based on science, as leaders saying, here's the right approach. And I remember even the lawyers, right, the Office of General Counsel at the department sort of congratulated us as we took a break in between sort of this discussion, saying, man, you guys put together like this kick-ass, this incredible case, right? This is solid. And then later on, the decision was not A, it was B. And I remember I went up to the decision maker at that point, right, as a leader, as the acting Surgeon General, and said, you know, I'm going to have to explain myself to others, right? Why is it A versus B? And I remember the answer. The answer was, and it was given with sort of a look, and the answer was because. And I remember as a leader, that was one of the most, you know, incredibly sort of disdain, you know, or heartfelt moments, you know, and difficult moments, because I couldn't just rely on because as a leader, right? The idea was, well, because fill in the blank, because it's not politically prudent, because you have too many enemies, because this is not going to work. And I think part of leadership is how do you bounce back from those becauses, right? Because there's one option in leadership, and this is, you know, to everyone out there, we've all been through it. There's an option of whether you give up and say, okay, I'm out of here. This is too crazy an environment. Or you basically say is, okay, you know, every battle won or lost is yet another battle won or lost, and the work continues. And I think the scheme of leadership really sort of revolves around this idea: is the work always continues, right? You're not going to win every battle in that leadership mode, but how you react to it really plays a role, right? So I think that's really critical. You know, I'm looking at the audience here, and I haven't seen them in such a long time. But John Babb, you out there?
I saw him.
Can you unmute, John? Are you able to or not? Oh, well, if you figure out, John, or if somebody can do it for him, that would be great, because I have a question for him. Back to you. So this whole idea is, I'm a junior officer, right? I'm a lieutenant, I'm an ensign, I'm a JG, I'm sort of starting early off my career. You know, and this was always a question that we would get, you know, usually either at the COA meeting or at you know, after the BOTC courses at graduation, would be, so what do I do? What do I do? I'm just starting out in this career as a Commissioned Corps officer. What do I do in terms of seeking out? How do I do this, right? How do I become a leader? Scott, I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Good question. First thing is, you know, how you develop as a leader is finding a good mentor. And the reason I tied that in is because you just mentioned one of my favorite mentors of all time in John Babb. When I came on board, I looked up to him tremendously, and you know, he actually probably doesn't even realize it or not, but changed my career path when he recommended me for a position to Admiral Carmona at the time to go overseas to do a detailed Department of Defense. And he did that from after he had worked with me and the anthrax response in the post office in New York City. So he's a longtime pharmacy mentor as well, but that was sort of the career changing thing. So the mentor that takes you under their wing and helps you out. I had many mentors. He was one of them, and a great one that I remember. But anyway, so to junior officers, you know, finding that mentor is really important. I think that an awareness that you have to continually develop is something I would tell junior officers to do. And I used to say, I don't say no very often, right? So whatever the opportunity was, even if it caused me some tremendous, time constraints, or you feel like you're getting pulled in a million directions, I always said yes to things. And I had this saying I used to say, be dynamic, never idle. And so, just like your car running, you just let it sit there and idle, and that's not good. So be dynamic. And what I mean by dynamic is, if you have an opportunity to do public speaking, do it. If you have an opportunity to take a different job in a different agency, or move in a geographic area, or mentor someone, publish, all those different things of a professional, say yes and do it. And that's the idea of being dynamic. So, whether it's new assignments and people think of, checking some of the boxes for promotion, true, but I really think of it as development. And if you want that depth and breadth of leadership, it would be good to be as dynamic as possible and to say no as little as you have to. So that would sort of be my idea of how to start a junior officer on the trail, on the pathway to becoming a good leader.
And I think that is so critical. You hit the proverbial, nail on the head here with that. When officers would talk to me about sort of the characteristics that I say that are part of a development process, and it goes back to this idea of born with it or nurtured into it. And the reality is that there's a lot of nurturing that goes on in the process, right? So, one doesn't come out. I mean, here's a shy kid, right, son of immigrants in Chicago, who really didn't shine in much of anything, right? Scholastically did okay. And then all of a sudden, as a young Ukrainian Boy Scout, he was elected the troop leader at the age of 11 or 12. And I thought, holy cow, how did that happen, right? And I look at that development of saying someone entrusted me only because everybody stood back and I'm the only guy remaining there, right? And the reality is that those types of experiences actually occur through the rest of your life, right? There are always opportunities out there. And the opportunities, in essence, are always ultimately the ones that are the risk-taking ones elicit a fear in you. And a lot of it is self-doubt, right? A lot of it is saying, well, I'm not sure if I can do that, right? Every single major transition I had in my career path as an officer, my first reaction was one of utter and utmost fear. I used to tell our officers all the time, fear is a good thing. It's basically saying you're not doing anything stupid, are you? Right? That's the question with fear. But ultimately what? You don't get paralyzed by fear, right? And whether I was an 11-year-old Boy Scout who basically had to do that, or whether it was a phone call from Regina Benjamin saying, I need a new deputy. Do you want to do this? Right? Both kind of had that same reaction, which is, I can't do this. I have no ability to do this. But really, it's a matter of two things, right? Risk-taking behavior, smart risk-taking behavior, the ability to take on risks with the idea that not every risk is going to result in success. There is potential failure in that. And it's really the sense is that, the old saying, you learn from those failures. But I also think an important trait, which you touched upon, Scott, is the idea of public speaking, right? I've never seen a really good leader, honestly, who wasn't able to put together at least, and not everyone is an orator like Scott Giberson, let's be honest. Not everybody is a veritable Abraham Lincoln of our era right now. But the reality is you have to be able to put together sentences and words and speak with passion. That's part of the approach to leadership that people really do feel a connection with, right? Really do feel a connection with. So I think that's a key component of
I have another question for you too now, Boris. You've been at the pinnacle of leadership, of the career leadership ladder in the Corps, permanent deputy surgeon general, acting surgeon general. How did you continue to develop as a leader, even though in everybody else's eyes you were the leader and you were at the top?
Well, I think, again, it's the whole sense of, part of the whole leadership concept is innate in what we're all experiencing as public health people right now. Is that if you have a leader who has too big of an ego to keep learning, then people are going to see through that, right? And it's the whole idea is you have to have that humility, which is each and every day, it's a matter of, okay, I'm having a brand new experience and now I'm learning. It's the ability. And one of the reasons I was so excited to have this time with you, Scott, is the ability to play off others, right? I mean, Scott was the acting deputy. I was the acting SG, right? We spent a lot of time together. And part of it was discussions, perhaps not formally, but discussions of leadership, of approaches, of tactics. How do we talk to X? How do we, inspire the Corps in this direction, right? So it's the whole idea, as I keep saying, is that learning keeps happening, right, in the whole process. And if you think you figured it out, right, then you're wrong, right? You're absolutely wrong on this. So I think that's an important part. I'm going to go to the chats right now because I think there's some certain nice little comments coming out here. I think John Babb is now unmuted. Is that correct, John?
That's correct, sir.
John, you are here, man. We miss you. We miss you. Can we see you?
You guys. I miss you guys.
So anyhow, real quick question to you, John, all right? You've been in leadership positions. You were there as all our sort of lives were being changed around with terms of a response capability within the Corps. And I really want to sort of touch upon you and your career path as well. And the idea is, how much does followership, being a follower, turn you into being a leader? What's your perspective on that?
Thanks for the easy question. Well, it's easy to be a follower when you have respect for your leader. It's easy to be a leader when you have respect for your followers. I remember this young officer by the name of Scott Giberson, who was a pharmacist in a single pharmacist station. And all of a sudden, President George Bush came up with the PEPFAR program. Unbelievable program to advance the AIDS program all across the world. So who holds up their hand? Scott Giberson. And despite having almost no support whatsoever from Washington, D.C., and the office that actually sent him there, he turned it into a wonderful opportunity. He comes back and he has done such a fantastic job that he is selected as a pharmacy CPO. I know this other guy who was a captain at NIOSH, and I met him whenever I journeyed to that facility and gave a little talk about the Commissioned Corps Readiness Force. So whenever FDA was looking for someone to run their biopreparedness program, I kept thinking about Boris Lushniak. And he had, in order to take this job, to move to Washington, D.C., he had to give up a phenomenal amount of, well, income. For instance, his wife was a practicing physician, and she had to give up her practice in order to come and support Boris in Washington, D.C. And all of a sudden, Boris blooms at FDA, and everybody respects him so much. It was just a wonderful thing to watch for both these guys. So I feel like that is a benefit of leadership, is to see people bloom that you might have had a small part in their fertilization.
Well, it is great seeing you again, Admiral, and ladies and gentlemen, that was a paid advertisement supporting Scott today. But thank you for the kind words, Admiral, and we miss you a whole lot, and hope your health is going well, and it's great seeing you. But it does bring up sort of that whole issue of these opportunities that go on. Scott, most challenging situation as a leader, what would you say? We talk about challenges, and you talk a little bit on my end. How about on your end? What did you learn?
Well, I mean, if I look across my career and let's just take the leadership, say the last decade and a half or something like that. I think most people would say, oh my goodness, the Ebola response, we were overseas, we were high risk, life and death, this and blah, 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 and so many issues and challenges. And that was probably the easiest. And that. I mean, yes, maybe to make the decision initially to go over there and everything, but everybody was focused on the same mission. Everybody had the same goal. It was logical what we had to do and how we had to do it. And yes, you deal with the challenges and mitigate them as they come. And so that was not really the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is when it's illogical, or when it's political, or when it's, you just can't figure out what it is, or what the reasoning is behind some of the decisions being made. And so, I think my biggest challenge is you know, you have strengths and areas for development as leaders. Over the years, I think, you know, one of the things that people have become to know me more as like an inspirational type or a charismatic type of a leadership. And so sometimes it's hard to control that reactionary sort of emotion to illogic. And so I think one of the biggest challenges for me was some of our time period where we had a little less support and you know, challenges with lots of different things, funding and all these other issues. And so that was a challenging time. And what did I do? I leaned on the people that gave me resilience. I found inspiration in junior officers. You know, you look at everybody in our Corps and you think about there's so many individual stories that are amazing that inspire you to do what you do. And that's what kept me going. And then I think, you know, it was challenging, but the solution to that challenge was also surrounding yourself with really good people. And I think a leader is comfortable in their skin when they could put some of the best people around them that they could find. Pure, competent, you know, excellent workers and officership. So, you know, yes, there were challenging times. Sometimes it went against my strengths, and yet I tried to find the resilience in other people and some of the great things that the junior officers were doing to inspire you, and surrounding myself with as good a crew as I could find.
You know, John Babb sort of, you know, reminded me of that era, right, when I was at NIOSH and sort of had a whole holiday season destroyed because of a phone call from him and later on from Radno Moritsugu about this FDA opportunity. And the reason it was destroyed was, you know, I was coasting, right? I had a cush assignment there. I was an 06, maybe a little bit vulnerable since I had applied for a division director position at DCDC and didn't get it. So there was a vulnerability. Maybe they knew about it, maybe not. But it made me sort of go down this pathway of kind of saying, okay, what else is out there? But it really does bring up this whole issue of why did John Babb, right, know about this guy, right? And this goes back again to our junior officers out there. Okay, changing your name to something unique like Boris certainly helps, right? Right? So that makes you stick out like a sore thumb, right? For a while there, I think there were 2 Borises in the whole Corps active duty. So that helps. But that aside, right? Part of it was, and yes, I'm here patting myself on the back, was guess what? We were put into assignments, and that was in the midst of anthrax, right? And you did a decent job in that assignment. And to our junior officers, especially out there, and even our senior officers, if you're looking for that sense of what is next in my career path, the reality is excellence in what you do. I think Paul Seligman put in a great line in the chat function, talking about this idea of it's not just the pursuit of leadership opportunities. If you're just fighting to find it, it's not going to happen, right? Because you're putting all your energies in trying to just impress others. The reality is that you really have to put in a whole lot of energy in doing your job well so that others do notice you. You know, one of the things I'm reading right now is actually stories about astronauts. Now, those of you who know me closely know I'm a failed astronaut. I applied for the astronaut program years ago. I thought I was going to be the first commissioned Corps officer on the space shuttle. I got kind of far in the process and then was rejected. Another down moment, right, for me. But now I'm really intrigued because in essence, in the astronaut Corps are really high hitters, right? These are incredibly gifted leaders already, right? Whether they're fighter pilots or whether they're civilians, scientists, right? These are people who have already been out there and are viewed as that leader. But even within that course, I'm reading more about the stories behind them. Chris Hadfield is the Canadian astronaut. Read his book, and he talks about the idiosyncrasies of the people in the program. Some were complete jerks, and everybody knew they were jerks. They were still astronauts, but they were never then chosen to necessarily lead. So just be good. Don't pursue this idea that I want to be Surgeon General of the United States or Acting Surgeon General of the United States. Do your job well, right? Do it well for the good of the mission, not for the good of yourself, right? And pursue that as the pathway towards leadership.
Yeah.
Paul says, use every opportunity to exercise leadership in your professional and personal lives, right? I think that's an important component. Others are talking about, I think Sarah Linda was talking about coaching. You know, she's involved in that line of work. She's become intimately involved in the idea of coaching. Others are bringing up the idea of reading books about this. Scott, are you a reader of leadership, and do you have a favorite book?
I do read. I generally read factual stuff. I don't read fiction or anything like that. I read a lot of leadership books.
Favorite?
Mine is obviously geared to what I feel has been a strength over the years, and it's called the Inspiration Code. And so, you know, it's, I think I can't remember, Christy Hedges, I think, wrote the book, but yeah, look it up. It's a good book to read. It's an easy read. So, you know,
Okay,
I did want
I'm
to
a
go.
fan. Ask me that question. Ask me that question real quick.
Yes. What is your big reader, Boris? What is your favorite book? What would you
Boy, I'm
recommend?
surprised by that question. Let me think for a second, Scott. No, it's actually one of my favorites is always Colin Powell. It worked for me in life and leadership. Harper, 2012. Okay. I think, again, you know, here's a guy with a military mindset, right? Minority in that world, which we all know, we have to bring up the issue of equity in leadership, right? Here's two white guys talking, right? About leadership and about the difficulties of leadership. If we were honest, it's a different playing field, right? For us versus others, right? I'm not hiding behind this idea, but, you know, I do believe, and I know politically there's a component of this that, you know, but, you know, of white privilege. I always viewed myself as the son of immigrants, as if, you know, my life was difficult. But, you know, especially I'm in this academic world, right? There's a whole lot of levels of inequities out there. And oftentimes in that world of leadership, it becomes more of a struggle. Let's be honest, right? On that front.
So
Okay.
I had
So,
something that
Go on. Shoot.
Admiral Batt brought up that I wanted to point. You know, I have sort of, if you just asked me like my umbrella sort of thing about leadership, and I would say there's two things that supersede all styles, philosophies, you know, all the things that, you know, you read about, you learn in curriculums and classes and stuff. And it's the first is you have to have the ability to create a condition in somebody else. So it's and it's like an infection, right? I have the ability to create a feeling in you. Same with me. When people think of their favorite leader, right? So if people think about John Babb or Boris Lushniak or Pam Schweitzer or Sylvia Trent Adams walking in a room, how do they make them feel? And it's that initial thing that's mapped in the neurochemistry of your brain, and it has to be positive. So however they lead, you know, if you're an autocrat like Steve Jobs and you can get a great feeling out of your folks, then that's great. If you're an introvert and you can still find a way to put that good feeling or that positive vibe in somebody else, that's the beginning of you being seen as a leader. You know, when you walk in a room, Boris, and people get that good feeling, they don't say, the heck with this guy. Well, maybe some people say that. No, but most people don't say that. Most people say, I can't wait to hear what he's got to say. And that's inspiring. And that's something that we need more than ever. And I think that's something that, you know, that's that positive mapping of the chemicals in your brain. And you can't stop it. It's already there. And that's like a resonant relationship with your leader. And the second thing, and Admiral Babb pointed this out, is that people have the choice to view you as a leader. And you have to realize that they have a choice. Just because you're in a leadership position means absolutely squat. So you better figure out a way to understand that they have a choice every single day, and every single behavior that you do, they have a choice to say, yep, he's my leader, I view him as my leader, or nope, or I don't view her or him as my leader. So, you know, those two things, doesn't matter if you're a participative leader, a charismatic leader, an introvert leader, whatever it is, that supersedes it. So I think those two things. And if you enter any type of position or leadership role with those two philosophies, you have a good start.
Great. Kelly Valente, you put in the question, but I want you to talk. So get ready to unmute yourself while I keep talking. So figure out how to use that button. That being said, you know, the other idea, you know, I brought up the idea of humility, and I think that's an important part of it. One is humor, right? Keep talking and laughing, right? As a leader, right? It's never all that serious, right? There are components where you have to stop laughing. But my God, Scott, you and I and others in our office, right? We had fun in the midst of this. Sometimes it was difficult, right, to laugh, but it is critical to keep laughing. The next component, and I saw Marlene and Hafner is on, and the Hafners are on. Both of them are with us here tonight. But I remember when I was deathly afraid of the rear admirals, right? When Babb called, right? And she was already a rear admiral at FDA. And you know, I'm thinking about this transition to DC, and I gave her a call, and I'm like, you know, how can I say no to these admirals? And she, you know, it was the old saying. She basically said, "Is Boris, don't forget, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else does," right? And I think that's, again, exemplifies the senses for a person like Kelly. Kelly, what rank are you?
I'm an 05
Oh,
with
05.
23
Okay,
years
so-
in the Corps.
Great. Well, that's great. So you have a question for us.
Yes, you know, and I'm a member of the board of directors for COA, and one of my platforms is to help officers with burnout. It seems that many officers these days, especially those in 05, trying to achieve those leadership positions and those leadership ranks, tend to push the goalpost too far and end up burning out and having all sorts of emotional and personal issues with that. So my advice, my question to you is, what advice do you have for those that are looking to become leaders in the Commission Corps, but struggle with having too many balls in the air and burning out?
Yeah, take that one.
Great. Well, you know, you said something really critical, Kelly. There's a talk by a guy named Sean Achor, and it's called The Secret to Happiness or something like that. But anyway, he says that we have figured out a way to push happiness beyond the cognitive horizon. And I say that because you basically just said they moved the goalpost so far. Being a commander, in my opinion, was one of the hardest as far as workload and desire to do well of any of my ranks that I've ever had. And you know, you're trying to get to that captain rank, and you're doing everything, you know, it's possible. So very, very challenging time period. You know, I think you have to take a step back sometimes and see and prioritize. It's easy when you're in our position, myself, Boris, and some of the retirees, to really talk to you about step back and take it all in and see how you're doing, you know, because that's easy for us to say with our lens, but you're still trying to, you know, succeed and climb that ladder. But it helps you organize your thought. It helps you to really realize what it's going to take to function. It's proven through research, you know, it's better to take breaks and then to work hard for a shorter period of time, and then to just go. The people who work 18 hours a day or 15 hours a day are not the most successful ones. And you know, good work-life balance, all that is key to being successful. So, you know, if you do have that ability, you know, step back, take a look, reprioritize, and do the right thing, not the volume of things, but do quality things.
Yeah, I agree with that component. In the longer run, the other aspect of burnout is really, and I always advised our officers, I still advise my students now, right? Whatever you're doing, and our alumni network as well, whatever you're doing, right? Reanalyze, right? Burnout has multiple reasons for it, right? It could be that I'm overworked here and now, right? The other aspect of burnout is when you feel, and especially from that leadership potential role, like you're going nowhere, that it doesn't really matter how much effort you put in, that you either won't be recognized, you won't be seen, and there really is a closed door scenario. That's a difficult thing to go through. But I really advocate this idea is every 3 to 5 years, reevaluate your situation. And you have very basic questions, right? This is longer term burnout scenarios, Kelly, that I'm looking at. And that longer term burnout is, you know, one is, you know, am I doing something that's important, right? That's an analysis point every 3 to 5 years. Am I appreciated for what I'm doing, right? Are people noticing what I'm doing? And the third component is, and there's multiple components. This is really basic. Boris is a very basic guy. The third component is, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Right? And burnout oftentimes results for one of those three answers being not in the right answer mode, right? It should be yeses all through. You can take short-term no's in there. But if you don't understand your mission and really don't think it's an important mission, and if people around you don't appreciate you, and if ultimately the happiness component isn't there, that's a setup for burnout. And that's where it becomes really, really, really tough. Because the only answer there is, you know, I may have to do something different, right? And you know, and the more we get encumbered in our lives, right? When Bab called me up at that point, right, I had my wife who was a physician that had a practice, and I had 2 little kids. And it was the first time in my life I was making a major decision that not only affected me, but affected a whole family unit. Luckily, there was support there. right? There was support. And oddly, it dealt with burnout because my wife, the physician, who I turned to multiple times with opportunities of saying, I'm going to leave Cincinnati and go to Atlanta, it's big, right? The flagship of CDC. She always said, you can't go to Atlanta because I have a job. I'm doing this time. I assumed I was going to return to John Babb and say the answer is no, because I'm going to blame it on my wife. And she said, I'm a little burnt out doing what I'm doing. And, Washington sounds kind of good, right? So sometimes it's not just about you and that burnout. You have to look around the burnout that exists around people as well. It's sometimes not just your decision, right? Keep those family units intact. It's not just about you. Okay, so I want a junior officer out there to unmute themselves and ask one final question, because I knew this was going to happen. Whenever Scott starts talking, it's like nonstop, right? So one last question from a junior officer unmuted. We have like 2 minutes to answer this. And I really hate that we've gone through this time already. I knew this was going to happen. Scott, you just can't shut up, can you?
Well, I still have the final laugh, Boris. Don't
There's a
worry.
message from Adele Davis in the chat box.
It's a good question.
Okay, Adele.
Adele, are you there where you can unmute?
Adele, can you unmute? And if not, we'll take your
She
question.
apologized. She doesn't have a mic. I'll
Okay.
read the question, Boris.
Okay.
You could answer it. Go ahead. What advice do you have for a younger officer stepping into their first official leadership role of a whole team, as far as leading others through change and keeping your own confidence up?
So keep up your own confidence by what? By believing in yourself, right? But also keep your confidence up by showing that you are still learning, right? You don't have all the answers. The failed leader is somebody who doesn't have the ability to actually tell their team, hey, I'm ready for this, right? But, I don't have all the answers. Engage that team, right? The whole idea of leadership is what? Is being able to be that person that looks above the horizon and looks further, right? It's the whole idea of distance. My 3 points of leadership that I've always talked about, right, is the 3 Ds of leadership. So decide, make decisions. Scott and I know that we used to have leadership within our own department that you couldn't pay them enough money to ever make a decision, right? So make decisions, right? Delegate, the 2nd D, right? Disappear, the 3rd D. Let your team flourish by giving them the opportunity to learn leadership and to do things. And the final thing is to do and deliver. At the end, somebody's going to expect you to have, right, done something. Make people laugh where appropriate, right? Be humble, right? Be confident. But don't be afraid to show your vulnerabilities on all this. So this is really a drag, Scott. You have one last question? We're like 30 seconds before we have to move on.
I have a last question.
Okay, we had 169 people. Everybody raise your hands if you had a fun time tonight. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything and it didn't work. Okay, David Shee is out there. Thank goodness he's happy. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Giberson, who is in his last few days of being an active duty officer, I want to, on behalf of a grateful nation, to ask him to stand up. Oh, you are standing, Scott. To basically, for us to give him the acclamation he so deserves, and then at an appropriate time that we will have an appropriate retirement ceremony for Scott, who has done so much good for the Corps. I am happy not only to call him a colleague, and a fellow leader in our time span within the Office of the Surgeon General and before, but also the dearest aspect of what we've turned into is close friends. So we talk like all the time, and we likely in our discussions talk about many of you behind your backs. So if you're, so anyhow, Scott, thank you so much. I know you're down in Florida, but thank you for your service to our country. And in these last few days of commissioned Corps of life before you become a retiree, I salute you and your family and Lynette and everything that you brought to us.